thank you all for coming this evening and to those watching online with us. Thanks. So I am Councillor Melanie Albrecht, the Mayor of Hindmarsh Council, and tonight we have the facilitator for the forum, Mr. Ben Fraser, who's the editor of the Wimmera Mail-Times, the Stall Times News and the Ararat Advertiser. Thank you to all the candidates who have come tonight. We had a number of candidates reach out to us at Council and ask whether they could come and present to us. So we thought rather than just presenting to us, why not invite them to present to the community as well. The proceedings tonight will be 5-minute presentations from each of the candidates. And at the end, we will have a question and answer. So I'd like to start this evening's proceedings by acknowledging the Indigenous community. Hindmarsh Shire Council acknowledges that this meeting is being held on the lands of the Wodjabalik, the Jawa, the Jawajali, the Wirragai and the Yubagok nations, and we acknowledge them as the traditional owners of country. We recognise the important ongoing role that our Indigenous people have in our community and pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. I would like to hand over to Mr. Ben Fraser to conduct the forum this evening. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for making your way out to Nhill if you've travelled from far, or quite a contingent from the football club. It's great to see so many local faces. Like I said, we've got each candidate is going to have 5 minutes to speak. They can speak on whatever they like to speak about. We will then, at the end of the introductions, open up the floor to questions. So if we could save our questions till the end. We're going to go in alphabetical order because that way there is no bias in regards to who we choose to go first. So Sophie, you will be invited to go first. Sophie is probably very well known for her pink bikes and is an independent candidate. And I'd like you to come up and share your thoughts with us.
Thanks for turning up, everybody. This is my first one, so I'm a little bit out of my depth, but anyway, we'll give it a go. I didn't really want to be first, but here I am. Once upon a time in Australia, if you worked hard, you could get anywhere. Today, if you work hard, you might be lucky enough to put enough food on your family's table and maybe pay the rent or your mortgage payments. What has happened to our once great country? My name is Sophie Baldwin, and I have chosen to stand as an independent in Mallee because I believe an independent best reflects those who went before us across this electorate. Independent people and independent families who could work towards progress, community and a shared prosperity. Today, Australia's progress and the Australian story for the aged, the families, the singles and our children has lost the plot, shipwrecked on the corruption of party politics. A system of snouts in the trough where big bucks are poured into the major parties from unseen industry mates and foreign investors. Australia has sold its soul and it needs to come back. Even though I have always been passionate about my community and agriculture, politics was never really on my radar until I stepped into water advocacy and I witnessed firsthand what has happened to our great country. My dad was a dairy farmer and I'm proud to have been one as well. I believe in Australia and I believe in our agricultural industry, which established our modern country and still underpins the success and wealth of many towns across Mallee. The organisation I represent in my real world job annually creates $6 billion in agricultural production, and yet we couldn't even get the water minister to respond to a letter. Southern Riverina irrigators are 1,800 generational, hardworking farming families. Families with proud, independent histories who have watched their irrigation allocation reliability halve, even though they pay licence fees in the tens of thousands of dollars each year, whether they receive an allocation or not. And they produce the staple foods that feed our nation: rice, grain, dairy, horticulture and livestock. SRI are a reflection of society, but nobody seems to care. I'm a single mum and I have 2 daughters. They are worried about their future, the environment, the cost of living and housing affordability, and nobody seems to care. I've spent my life in rural communities. I've been a dairy farmer and a rural journalist, and I've spent my life talking to people across rural Australia, and I do care. I think we are all poised on the murky precipice of party politics, where the true rulers are powerful donors ruining our country. I know it's ruining water. We have a federal government which talks about building the economy, yet still treats provision of early learning and childcare as if it was optional babysitting. In rural areas, there is highly skilled workforce available if families have access to childcare. For the budget to offer funding for 20 daycare centres just shows how out of touch they really are. We could build 20 across Mallee alone and still not solve the shortage. The city-based model of care does not fit in the country. We have residents in towns right across Mallee who cannot access basic healthcare. GPs have closed their books or only come to town a couple of days a week. Often it's a month's wait and it could be another 12 plus weeks for a specialist appointment. And let's not forget the expensive and long drive to access the services. But no one seems to care. Canberra has allowed a privatised aged care system only the wealthy can afford, but where people become extremely wealthy from providing substandard care. We have long waiting lists for access to healthcare. We face a mental health crisis amongst our youth. In regional Victoria, most of our towns have nothing to offer. Not everyone bulk bills either, making services in some towns out of reach for those who desperately need them. We need investment in nation building infrastructure like rail, roads and bridges. The cost of living is out of control. Fuel is $2 a litre or more. If you can find a house to rent in regional Victoria, there's a better than even chance you probably can't afford it.
1 minute, thank you.
We don't have anywhere near enough social housing for anyone, let alone victims of domestic violence or homeless. Instead of a government investing in the long-term manufacturing technology, agriculture, research, we have become totally reliant on imports. We have refugees who spend 10 years in limbo, paying taxes without access to Medicare, and that's okay. Australia needs a federal ICAC. Government needs to be held accountable. The country demands it and I support it. As your independent, I may never be in government, but I'm never in opposition either. I have the power to vote on every piece of legislation the way Mallee wants it treated. And I have the ability to present bills and legislations without fear of party politics. I truly represent Mallee, not parties, not big business, not the lobbyists, and definitely not overseas interests. I am your independent voice in Canberra, the only way your voice will ever get heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. Not too bad for just finding out you're going first. She got it all worked out. Claudia Haenel, a incumbent Horsham Rural City Councillor, an independent candidate, and third generation Wimmera resident. I'll invite you to come up to the lectern.
Thanks everyone for coming along tonight. I'd like to also thank my fellow candidates and our incumbent Dr. Anne Webster for being here tonight as well. I would also like to acknowledge our traditional owners, past and present, and the land that we stand on. So a little bit about me. So I'm a local government councillor just down the road in Horsham, Wimmera girl, born and bred and have grown up here. Passionate about this area, and I've been concerned about politics, I guess, and that was the reason for stepping into local government, because there are so many issues here in our community. And I was just down here at the football club and netball club this afternoon, so thanks for showing us around. And there are so many issues here on a local level that we can assist and help with from a federal perspective. But most importantly, I've chosen to be an independent. I've never been a part of any party or political party. And I've decided to step up as an independent candidate because it is just those communities like we see here represented tonight that I would like to bat for and negotiate for in Canberra. I just feel that, and with all respect to our incumbent, you know, she does very, very well. It must be very hard to toe a party line, but we have had the same since Federation. So I think it's really time for a change. And as an independent candidate, I'm standing as a community independent, meaning I'm not backed by any big groups or self-interest or vested interest. It's just purely me backing myself in my experience as a local government councillor, and also in my diverse experience working in very many industries over my lifetime. I've worked in the agricultural sector as a wool classer in the wool industry, in the wine industry as an advertising manager for Australian vignerons. I've travelled overseas, I've travelled around Australia. You know, I've had lived life experience. So I think that's something I can offer and bring to the table when representing you. And I guess fairly importantly too, people always ask me, well, what do you stand for and what will you deliver for us and what will you do? And I think that's why it was so important that we came along to the football and netball club today, because it's not so much what I think that I would want, it's more what the community says they want. And things like expansion of local sporting venues where it involves community, it's health and well-being, it's, you know, it's these clubs are the fibre of our community. You know, it's when I hear that these are the projects and these are the things that people want that I take on board. And I think if I was to be successful and represent you all at federal government level in Canberra, on the crossbenches, we have that power to negotiate for sporting clubs and any other community concerns that I would represent. So sitting on the crossbenches as an independent for you, the community, actually gives you power, because you can say to me, these are the projects that we value, this is what we want, this is what we think is important, so bat for us. And on the crossbenches, we can do just that. So if there's legislation and various things that the government wants to put through, then we have that negotiation and that negotiation power for you, our communities within the electorate of Mallee. So that said, my door is always open. I've got a website, www.claudiahaenel.com.au. I have a 12-point policy plan for economic recovery for our electorate of Mallee. It's currently being revised due to the budget that we just had. So you'll see a clear outline of how I see Mallee can progress in all the sectors, from economy, agriculture, health, all those things that are so important to us. So please reach out. I'm happy to talk and find out what are the specific concerns for all the communities here at Mallee, and hopefully I'll be able to represent you all in Canberra. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Claudia. Next up is Stuart King, a United Australia Party candidate. He is a third-generation Mallee farmer, a father of 9 children, and a former engineer and an aforementioned turned farmer. Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak with you tonight. In his 1981 inauguration address, President Ronald Reagan declared, "In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem, government is the problem." 40 years later in Australia, how true is this? $1 trillion of debt. 1 trillion. It's a big number. What does it look like? It looks like a 1 with 12 zeros after it. It looks like 10,000 hectares covered in $100 notes. It looks like a stack of $1 coins that goes round the earth 70 times. It looks like what the Nationals call getting it done. Now, if it meant that you were driving on a freeway standard road network, the national rail system was fully interconnected for freight and passenger rail services, you could use your mobile phone anywhere and you had high-speed internet, you could get an ambulance when you needed it, and it would take you to a local hospital and you would actually see a GP, then maybe, just maybe, you could justify $1 trillion of debt. But you don't have any of this. You have around $40,000 of debt for every man, woman and child in Australia. And why is debt so bad? Because debt drives up inflation, drives up interest rates, and it drives up the cost of living. But neither the Liberal National Government nor the Labor Greens Alliance in their budgets last week offered a debt repayment plan, just more spending. And you can't spend your way out of debt. United Australia Party will release an economic plan for Australia this Thursday, which sets out a definitive plan to repay the debt, to manage interest rates, to keep families owning their own homes and farms, and to deliver nation-building infrastructure. With a sound financial plan, we can offer real relief for rural people, including a 20% tax concession for people living and working in regional Australia. This will stimulate growth in regional economies and facilitate the reinvigoration of processing and manufacturing industries in Australia. A manufacturing economy requires cheaper energy, and we will find a balance between coal-fired, nuclear, and renewable sources to achieve this. Locally, I will listen to, represent, and advocate for communities and the local councils who represent them. The funding model for local government must be reformed so that they can actually afford to deliver the infrastructure and the services that you expect and deserve. Telecommunications, roads, rail, hospitals, health, services, water, the list goes on and on and on, all neglected by previous governments, all requiring actions which we will deliver. And of course, the United Australia Party will restore and protect the freedoms that our forefathers fought and died for. What is freedom? Margaret Thatcher once said, a man's right to work, to spend what he earns, to own property, to have the state as servant and not as master, they are the essence of a free economy. And on that freedom, all our other freedoms depend. In that context, where are we now? A man or woman, in many cases, doesn't have the right to work or do many other things, unless, of course, he or she complies with taking a government-mandated experimental vaccine. With digital identity and a central bank digital currency, we are but one step away from a social credit system, removing your freedom to spend what you earn. Ownership of property will become out of reach for the majority, and the government has allowed unelected bureaucrats to be the master, and each and every one of you is the servant. The United Australia Party will give you freedom from mandates, masks and lockdowns. We will end the segregation of society and we will let people work. Freedom of thought and speech, not Orwellian-style censorship of alternative viewpoints. Freedom of religion, association and movement will reunite families and reunite communities. Freedom from the indoctrination of our children with woke agendas. Restoration of traditional family and community values. Freedom from fear. We will end the government-funded, media-driven propaganda. The United Australia Party has candidates in every seat, plus the Senate. We are the real deal, a genuine alternative. I offer you relevant real-life Mallee experience in farming, construction, business, and community. I offer you critical thinking, honesty, integrity, truth. I offer you true local representation and not a party discipline. I offer you a real alternative to 73 years of rule and reign of the National Party in Mallee. Do something different this time. Save Australia. Vote 1, Stuart King, and let's get something done for a change. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Next up is Chris Leahy. He is an Australian Citizens Party member. He's father of 5 kids and is currently a student of engineering. Quite fitting with a wife as a teacher. His former dairy farmer.
Yes.
Who is now turning his trade. He's turning his trade to engineer, refrigeration engineering,
Yes.
right? So, Chris, by all means, come up. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all those in the Hindmarsh Shire Council. Thank you for those here present and those online who have tuned in, and my fellow candidates. Thank you very much. Well, I'm a bit of an old dog. I've been here before, but my message is the same. We're citizens taking responsibility. National banking. Return to government-owned public banking services and systems, including a postal savings bank, development of infrastructure banks, development, revive manufacturing and agriculture through great infrastructural projects, building Australia and creating millions of meaningful jobs. Justice. Compel compensation for financial victims, predators of greedy, unscrupulous banking practice, and Australia's inhumane treatment and mistreated of asylum seekers and refugees, and bring Julian Assange home. Sovereignty. No war with China. Establish an independent foreign policy and pursue peace and diplomatic relations and economic development. For those of you who know me, I'm from a rural background, a dairy farmer from the Riverina, now living in the Mallee in Lake Boga. And as I have heard, I have 5 children, all of them at various stages of their life through university and what have you. I was one of those people that Sophie talked about. I was one of those people whose family business was destroyed by outrageous government border policy and policy on trade. Our party has a 15-point platform to rebuilding this nation and returning it to what it used to be in the era of the old Labor Party, John Curtin and Ben Chifley. There may be some of you out there who are maybe old enough to remember those 2 gentlemen. They are some of my heroes. But I would like to speak into a couple of the policies that directly affect us here in the Mallee, and particularly here in northwest Victoria and Nhill and all the surrounding towns. A public post office people's bank. Break the oligarchy of the big 4 banks, which have arrogantly and mindlessly closing branches and debanking lawful businesses and reducing access and availability to cash. We must establish a Commonwealth Postal Savings Bank using the post office branches all across our electorate to guarantee full low-cost banking services, deposit security, and access to cash for all Australians, individuals and businesses and commodities. Goes hand in hand with the National Infrastructure Bank. Establish a National Infrastructure Bank from which local, state and federal governments can borrow for infrastructure projects to build Australia and create jobs, ending Australia's reliance on foreign borrowing, asset recycling, privatisation and expenditure, ending public and private partnerships, as we've seen here recently with the Murray Basin Rail Plan, which has become an absolute disaster. I took the time to look into the project and what it's achieved and what it hasn't achieved, and I can absolutely say this is the poorest example of how public and private partnerships for major nation-changing infrastructure can be undertaken. Prioritise projects including the Bradfield Water Scheme and the Clarence River Diversion Schemes in North Queensland.
Well, mate, Chris.
And the Iron Boomerang project, bringing natural resources from our west across to the eastern seaboard and taking back materials from manufacturing back to the west. This all can be done with a national credit bank and national credit system. Vote for the Citizens Party. It is a vote for a postal bank. Guarantee financial services for all. Guarantee all deposits. Keep our postal services viable, including licensed post offices. Lend to local and small businesses. Invest in local areas. Invest surplus deposits in the National Bank of Force Essential Regulators and Health. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a choice. We can stay with what we've known, or we can go for something that's proven. This has been done in the past and we can do it again. We can build Australia and make it a great nation. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, our last speaker is our incumbent representative of the seat of Mallee. It is Dr. Anne Webster, a member of the Nationals Party. She was elected in 2019 and is the chair of the Standing Committee for the Communications and the Arts, the Joint Committee on Human Rights and the Joint Standing Committee on the National, Capital and External Territories. Put your hands together for Dr. Anne Webster.
Good evening. It is great to get to this time of the three-year cycle, back to elections. You will have noticed, as I have, that so much has happened over the last 3 years, most of it unexpected. And managing that has been a real challenge for every level of government, the federal government, the state governments, and even local governments. I think history provides us the opportunity to learn a lot of lessons. And if we, the old adage is, if you don't learn, then you're doomed to repeat the mistakes of history. And I think this 3-year period has certainly provided me with many lessons to learn, many opportunities to represent this great electorate of Mallee and to speak up for the interests of Mallee and the people of Mallee, whether it's business, whether it's charities, whether it's health, whether it's education, whatever the federal government component is, has been a challenging but absolutely incredible experience. I want to thank the people of Mallee for the privilege that I've had in the last 3 years. There is much talk about the fact that we don't get what we deserve in Mallee. What I want to do is talk about the $2 billion that is itemised, and it should be on the back of some newspapers shortly, the $2 billion that has come into Mallee, whether it's Albucacha Bridge, whether it is roads, infrastructure across Mallee. There has been a tremendous amount invested in Mallee. And I'm really proud of that. And tomorrow I go and see the Albucacha Bridge, and really looking forward to seeing that bridge built. There are many things that have not yet been funded that matter to the people who live here. And I see our Davis Park Football Club here, and very, very aware of that particular project locally. And for those who don't know, it's my big stuff up in my 3 years is announcing that I'd actually funded it when we haven't yet, I say yet. So yeah, look, confessing that one, not my proudest moment. The work to support business has been incredibly important. I am very proud of the FTA that has been signed with the UK. That has meant, again, because Nationals were in government and we worked very hard as a party to ensure that the ag visa was incorporated. Now, for those who aren't into agriculture, which I find hard to believe here, but anyway, I'm going to say it, the ag visa means that unskilled, semi-skilled and skilled workers can be brought in from countries that sign up to that. And right now we have Vietnam who've finally signed up, and we have other countries looking to sign up. And it provides a workforce that is desperately needed all over Australia, but particularly for Mallee. You would be aware we have large swathes of horticulture in the north, and many farmers have not been able to actually harvest their crops because they haven't had workforce. It has been absolutely dire and desperate with international borders closed. And this is a huge sigh of relief for most farmers, and they are absolutely looking forward to having a sustainable workforce going forward. This is the ag visa will be for abattoirs and other industries as well. It gives a pathway to permanency, and that's been one of the serious lacks in our visa programs for workers. The ag visa is profound. The other areas that we've worked hard over this last 3-year period, of course, is managing the outcomes and the consequences of the COVID pandemic. Economically, Australia is actually positioned well. Yes, I acknowledge $1 trillion debt. I also want to acknowledge that this week alone, commodities have been stated to have been exported at 495 billion. That's incredibly significant in less than a full financial year. It's a really great outcome. In terms of our OECD partners, Australia is actually doing incredibly well in terms of our double vaccination rates, in terms of our death rates. Australia can be very proud, and it involved every Australian doing their part for that to be achieved. In my office, I look over this last 3-year period, and there's also been a lot of sorrow. The COVID closures, the border closures have meant that loved ones could not be with loved ones who were dying or giving birth. There were certainly a lot of tears in my office supporting people and getting some wins for people to be able to be with their families in those last days and being able to get surgery. Was that a 1 minute?
That's 5. That's 5
that's
minutes.
a full 5 minutes. Oh, I'm a true politician. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Need to give you a bell.
I know. It's using my inside voice. I've frequently been told that I'm far too loud in the workplace, but I apologise. And ladies and gentlemen, this opens up the time where you, the constituents of this seat, get a chance to ask questions. We ask that you wait until the microphone is there, because otherwise the people at home and the people in this room will not be able to hear you. Please, if you have a question directed towards a particular person, please identify them initially so that they can hear the whole question. I will open up. Let's see, do we have any initial questions? Oh, there we go. Very quick to the draw. Thank you.
My questions to Dr. Anne Webster. Before the last election at this candidates panel, Ray Kingston stood up as an independent. He told us we had to get rid of the National Party or get rid of this as being a safe National Party seat, or would continue to just be taken for granted. And then the situation we found ourselves in is that the Nhill grandstand was made the cut for funding, and Senator Shotgun Mackenzie in her wisdom decided to dud that for us and have us miss out. I was incredibly disappointed that as our National Party member for Mallee, what you came out to do was defend Senator Mackenzie as being entitled to do what she did, rather than speak out against the injustice of us being denied. Who's interrupting?
Sorry, guys, if we could just keep the questions to the form of the question, and if we could limit our calling out from the crowd, this night will move much smoother.
Yes. So, given that, why should we be supporting the National Party?
The role of a minister when it comes to grants is, well, in fact, every grant, there is a competitive process, and then that goes to the department. The department determines which ones tick a box, etc. And then the minister has the final sign off. What I believe I was saying at that point in time, that is her right to make decisions. That's why she has been chosen by the leader of the party at that stage to be a minister, because theoretically she's got all that under control. I'm pretty sure that was very early on in my tenure too. Is that correct? Have I got that right?
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah. Anyway, the thing that I would say is that I'm very, very aware of the Nhill grandstand and have been advocating very hard for it. And, you know, I can't promise anything because it's not my job to do that, but I am certainly fighting very hard for it.
It has been requested from the candidates that are at the start of your question to identify yourself, who you may represent, or just your name in general, just to help out the process. Thank you.
Thanks, Philip.
Next, I believe we've got one from the Nhill Tigers Football Club.
Yeah, my name's Brett Wheaton. My questions to the panel, and look, thank you for all coming to Nhill tonight and representing it. Nill's a bit of a regional hub and attracts a lot of people to its town. It doubles through the day for workforce, but with that, and employment and all the other things that come, and people that do come and stay here, they need recreation. And as you're all aware, we're actually giving you some information to take home for a bit of light reading. Our facility at Davis Park is very old, very antiquated, and is in need of a lot of love and care. We've unsuccessfully had 5 different opportunities for grants. And just to wrap it before with the Ann Webster thing, and I mean, Bridget McKenzie, we were 82 out of 100 votes, so we were very high up on that list, and it was disappointing we did miss out. But that's an old story. The new story is, and that's to everybody, if you are elected to the Mallee seat, what are you going to do that's going to help local communities like Nhill Sporting Club to be able to offer those facilities and have that opportunity to deliver sport safely in our community town?
Is there a particular person you'd like to answer the question first?
No.
I don't want to pick anyone in particular. Okay. Who would like to go first? Chris?
Yeah, I'll speak into that.
All the microphones are on.
They're all on, okay. Thanks for your question. And I indeed feel your pain. Having been involved in a sporting club and still involved in a sporting club, you know, I've been in the position where we've waited nearly 17 years, application upon application or funding application upon funding application, knocked back and rerouted and all sorts of things. So I absolutely understand your frustration and your pain. Fair to say what I would bring to Nhill and this electorate would certainly see the implementation of infrastructure and development banks, because this is where these things get funded from. Important hubs like this that maintain community welfare and health are absolutely integral in the sustenance of these communities that they're in. So I would absolutely see that funding comes from a different source that would make sure these projects are well funded and completed, rather than being a squabbly match or a, as you've just mentioned, you're in a list, and well, that's very debasing. I'm sorry to hear that.
I'm happy to go. I'll be brief because I'm sure there's plenty more questions. I have the benefit of being a councillor in Swan Hill Rural City Council. I'm on leave of absence at the moment, but I have some understanding of how local government funding works or doesn't work. And projects like yours that you're talking about, the funding models simply don't work. This whole grant process, so much time and money is consumed with grants, and by the time the money actually gets to the community group, I don't know what percentage of it's been swallowed up along the way, but it's a hell of a lot. I think a better model would be a funding model that's based on somehow based on taxation or GST revenue, the size of a municipality, the population of a municipality, and then some sort of correction factor for need. Because at the end of the day, what works in the country, in the city, doesn't work in the country. What works in Swan Hill, what works in Mildura, doesn't necessarily work for Nhill. So there needs to be more equity in funding, and I think it'd be a better model would be that councils, local governments actually knew before the start of their financial year how much money was actually going to come in, and more money could be spent on community facilities if we refined this grants approval process. Thanks, hope that helps.
I also think there's opportunity to look at the way shires are funded, and particularly through the federal assistance grant. That hasn't been updated since the 70s. I think it's a pretty old model. So obviously there is ways that they could relook at funding shires, not based on a population, but rather whether it is the size or things like that. Obviously too, I think that there's community groups like Nhill here that are combining a lot of their different clubs together in a hub is awesome. And I think you need to look outside also at the benefits of that these bring to community, mental health benefits, and all those other things. When you've got an engaged community, you've got a thriving community. So you shouldn't continually miss out. I mean, if you've applied for 5 grants, you obviously really want your facility, and it's obviously well and truly needed when you've got so many other clubs supporting. So I think you've got to look at the federal assistance grant and the way that's funded to make that better for shires.
And thanks for having us out there today. So I know that that venue. I was a massage therapist for the Horsham Demons, so I've worked in the change rooms there, and I understand what it's like there on a busy Saturday. And needless to say, projects like this are integral to community health and well-being. They bring families together. They bring communities together. They it's important for those that have been part of those clubs over the years to still come back and connect. It's important for the young children, young people coming through, to find friends and build relationships. And sport's always done that for communities. So, and having been involved or being involved in local government, I understand how competitive this process is to get this funding. That said, if this is the priority for this community, then if I was elected and was representing you in Canberra, this would be the priority project that I would be putting forward and stating that, based on what government is wanting to put through across the table, legislation, bills, that this is the negotiation for this community because it's important. It's the number one thing that's come up when visiting this community. So it would be something that I would definitely bat for, because being here tonight, I can see that it is the priority. Thanks. Hope that helps.
What I would say is that, COVID hasn't brought terribly many positives, but one of them is the local roads and community infrastructure grants, and any of the 12 shires that the Mallee is responsible for, the Mallee Electorate is responsible for, have told me just how incredible it is, because it's money that goes to the Shire Council, which is untagged. They don't have to do X, Y, or Z with it. They can do what they like. Councils have loved that. They have loved that because it's given them some flexibility. The FAGS grants have, I think we're getting a forward payment on those again soon. Building Better Regions funding has brought millions into Mallee. Building Better Regions and local roads and community infrastructure grants are both National Party policies. They've come to the regions because we know it's really important. You can't have funding based on population. Doesn't work, basically. Our regions need funding, which gives them some flexibility. Fortunately, you don't need to get a new grandstand every couple of years. And, the Shire Council makes the decisions on the basis of the lobbying that has been made by community groups and members. So it is, from a federal perspective, we absolutely prefer to work with local councils rather than the state government, because they cream off a significant amount of the funding before they get it out, and it's not necessarily even spent where from a federal point of view, where the federal government says it should. So that's our preferred route as the Nationals, is to make sure more funding comes to local councils, and then, because they know what's important in the region. State government often doesn't, and federal government is not necessarily on the ground in terms of the bureaucrats in Canberra who go through all the grants. It's the local council. So it's incredibly important that we work well with local council to be fighting for the needs that are presented by the community. So from my point of view, we just need, we're really keen to see that it continues, that the LRCI continues, because it's great for jobs, it's great for outcomes, and it's great for businesses that provide the goods and services to make that happen.
Hopefully that provides you with a piece of solace in regards to what you might do in the future. I understand that you and many other sporting clubs and community clubs are feeling the same pain. Having been a president of a sporting club myself, still waiting for some funding of a hockey field 25 years later. So thank you.
You've trumped me.
Yeah. So we've got a question from the internet.
Yeah, from the internet. There's a couple, well, we've got a whole range of them, but I thought I'd just throw in one or two
Fantastic. Yeah,
to mix things up a bit. I'm a disabled person who has had my NDIS funding cut by $22,000. Is anyone prepared to back fully funding NDIS with individual focused needs driven plans? And that's from a Rosanna May online.
Just to be equitable, I think we'll go in the reverse order of what we did before.
Yes. Thank you for the question. Yes, we have a lot of inquiries from people who struggle to get the funding that they need, and the system is being upgraded all the time because external assessors are part of the problem. So yeah, just yes.
Yeah, I'm happy to go.
It's an open-ended question, so if anyone wants to respond, Claudia.
Thank you, and thanks for the question. I think NDIS and the funding that is that the model is at the moment with it is really needs review, and this is part of my 12-point economic recovery plan, and that is to future-proof particularly NDIS, because right now that model, I don't believe, is sustainable. It needs to be revised. For instance, a recipient may be eligible for $100, say, just for instance. They may only receive a portion of that, $40 or $50, because the other $50 or $60 goes to providers and assessors, or whoever these middle guys are, or the middle companies, and the recipient really is missing out. So I honestly believe that it really needs to have some reform, and it needs to be reviewed for it to be sustainable, and we need to future-proof NDIS for a lot of people in our community. Thanks for the question.
Sophie?
I don't think I can really add anything. Sorry. I don't think I can really add anything much else either. I've heard the same stories. So the NDS model is broken and obviously needs fixing. So yeah, I would agree.
Stuart?
Yep. Agreed. As my conversation with the grant system, NDIS, aged care, a lot of the money is getting scooped up in the middle by privateers, private providers. The system is broken and it needs to be reworked.
I don't have much more to add to that, other than for this person online. Once again, I completely empathise with you. I have my son here tonight who has Down syndrome, and we are in the battle of our life with the NDIS, and I cannot for the life of me fathom why they are doing this, why this system has become so broken. I have to agree with everyone here that the system needs to be changed, and where it's managed and how it's run. And we have a plan, and one of our points is to deal with this with the Citizens Party. But yes, thanks for your question online.
Thank you, guys. We've got a question at the back that's scheduled next. Could you just please stand up and identify yourself, and if you've got a question targeted towards a particular MP or candidate?
Councillor
Sorry.
Deborah Nelson from Hindmarsh Shire Council. COVID has had such a dramatic impact on our communities and still is. I know in my community there are so many elderly people who are still scared to go out and are still isolating fairly well in their homes. So my question is, I'd just like to know just a very quick answer on what every person thinks on vaccination mandates in keeping our communities safe. Thank you.
Sophie, we might go left to right for this next group response.
As far as vaccinations go, I guess a lot of people have gone and got themselves protected against COVID and done the right thing. Or if that's, I still believe that essentially it's your body and your choice. Really, I think it comes down to that. Most people have gone out and got vaccinated. So mandates, I don't think have, some mandates have probably been harmful and perhaps not delivered what they should have. So as far as mandates moving forward, I think, you know, if you're vaccinated and you're up to date, well, you know, your life should go on. And obviously, yeah, sorry, that's about it for me. That's a hard one for me.
Stuart?
One simple: end vaccine mandates. It's as simple as that. If you want to get vaccinated, get vaccinated. If you don't want to get vaccinated, don't get vaccinated. Let doctors do what doctors are supposed to do and restore the doctor-patient, the sanctity of the doctor-patient relationship, and allow them to practice.
Yeah, on that, on mandates, I don't believe mandates should be the answer to our vaccination outcomes. Everyone should have a relationship with their healthcare professional and let that relationship determine your decisions on how you exercise your participation in vaccine programs. So, but mandating as an outright is damaging to a lot of industries. I'm working in an industry that I've chosen to be vaccinated because I enter into high risk environments like aged care facilities and childcare facilities. And I've chosen to do that because I believe it's the right thing to do. But those people who haven't got that option have become unemployed and the like. So that is not a good outcome. It just highlights the crisis our medical healthcare system in Australia is in. If we had the options to manage people's participation in vaccine programs as they would see fit, then I think that would be a better way to approach this rather than mandating.
Thanks for the question. I've been not in favour of mandates right from the early days, fundamentally because Australia has a really incredible history with vaccines, immunisation. And I didn't believe that the government needed to put anybody's arm up their back to go and get it. I think that there's been a lot of ill feeling in the community because we don't like government telling us what to do. And I think currently the mandates and the pressure for people not to be able to work are appalling, given how short we are on workforce all over the country. You know, I have professional people who tell me that they're not at work because they don't want to get the vaccine mandate. The vaccine. I'm vaxxed 4 times. So, you know, I'm pro-vax clearly, but I think people should have the choice. I think that the regulation that has been imposed on workforces, you know, you have to sign in. We did it tonight, you know, I think we're all over it. We just want to get on with our lives. And the more people get on with their lives, the more it will give confidence to our older people who are feeling really insecure, who are worried, and who don't go out. My mother's one of them. Don't go out very often anyway. And I think we just need to stop now. We don't do this for the flu. We don't all stay home. We are responsible adults. And if we're really crook, we stay home. If we're not, we go and do our job.
Yes, this has been a hot topic, hasn't it? Keeping our community safe through COVID and not having mandates. Okay, so it has been the toughest time that I can remember in our generation. These lockdowns and the mental health and wellbeing of our communities. But I think we do need to, and I agree with Dr. Ann, that we do need to progressively go forward now. You know, are coming out of this. We have economies that we need to rebuild, and we do need to get on with our lives. And clearly the electorate does not want government interfering in their lives any more than we have to. That said, I do find it's problematic because for those of us here tonight who have said they don't agree with mandates, and let's just be clear, I mean, this isn't going to be the last pandemic that we face in our generation, I don't believe. So that said, going forward, all those that said that they wouldn't do mandates, what is going to happen and what would you do if you were elected to Canberra to keep your community safe in the next viral outbreak? And I know I've had this conversation with Stuart already over the phone, and I said to him, Stuart, what would you do then if you were Prime Minister of Australia? And I mean, I know that there's the ivermectin option. I would actually just like to know what people's thoughts are on this ivermectin option. I mean, Stuart and I have already had this conversation. So Stuart, maybe you'd like to answer that for me, because let's face it, this is not going to be the last time that we're going to have to keep our communities safe. So could you help me out with that and answer that for the community? Thanks.
Would you like to?
I'm not a doctor, so I don't have the ability to prescribe ivermectin or alternative treatments. However, thank you, I'll get to that. My point of view is simply that the sanctity of the doctor-patient relationship has been stopped. APRA, the regulating body of the health system, have shut down doctors from having alternative viewpoints. The only viewpoint they can have is vaccination. The government has funded media to drive the propaganda of fear. And that's why the old people are suffering. That's why the children are suffering. That's why people can't go back to work. People are scared. There's people that can't attend tonight because they're not vaccinated. Now, that's not a crack at the Hindmarsh Shire Council whatsoever. You're just following a ridiculous rule. It's as simple as that. The research is in. The vaccines are only have efficacy now for, I don't know, something like 8 to 12 weeks. There's research studies from overseas that prove that there are alternative therapies that work. Uttar Pradesh, a province in India, actually handed out millions of blister packs of alternative treatments because they couldn't get access to vaccination, and their COVID numbers went down significantly. So the simple answer is that we should let doctors be doctors. We should let researchers be researchers. We need to look at how pharmaceutical companies are funded. We need to look at the directors of our government agencies and how their research is funded, because if you have a look, you'll soon find out how those people that sit as directors of boards, unelected bureaucrats for government, have a look. You'll find out where they get their money from. And it doesn't come from the government. Some of it does, but not all of it. So we need to bring independence back, not just into health. We need to bring independence back into agricultural research, into climate research, the whole lot. Bring back some independence.
Thank you, Stuart. There's a very patient man in front. Would you like to introduce yourself and ask a question?
Alan Malcolm Hopton, is that the one? All right. Look, before I ask the question, I'd just like to point out to the candidates, respectively, that a number of the issues that you canvassed in your 5-minute talk were actually state issues. This is a federal election, and some of the points you made were may be relevant, but they were more issues for state government compared to federal government. So please check that out. Now, my question is one I've asked at several of these forums in the past towards the independents, because independents will stand up and tell you what they don't have party affiliations and they're independent. Now, we've had the experience in Mildura of 2 independents in the past 20 years who have claimed the same thing and have invariably turned out to be Labor supporters, put Labor government in. So my question to you is basically, if you are in a position to determine which side, and remember, you won't be the leading party, you'll be one in there are 158 to 100 and something seats in the House, and there may be, say there's 10 or a dozen independents, so you're not going to form government. But if we get a close election, it may well be that you can determine which party is in government. And my question to you is, I would like you to answer it honestly. Most of you will say, I will wait and see which way the cards fall. We'll wait till see their policies. This is not the direct answer. We would like to know, and I think people have every right to know, that if you were elected as an independent, but you had the choice to choose which party of the major parties which you would support in government, which one you would support? As I said, it's historically, if you look at the
Malcolm, would you like
record.
the candidates to answer the question?
Yeah, well, I just want to point out one point with it, that historically, nearly all independents support Labor or the Greens. And the second part of the question is, why don't independents stand in Labor seats?
Okay, so Claudia, it's a two-part question. Would you like the question?
Six
repeated?
parts in that question there.
We'll stick to which of the major parties would you support as an independent, and why have you not stood?
Why don't Labor independent candidates stand in Labor seats? If you look at all the independents, they've been very standing in certain seats.
Yeah, no, I just wanted the question repeated. Sorry? I think we'll just stick to the first question in regards to, because the other one is slightly skewed. Claudia, you let go
Okay,
first.
Malcolm, thanks for the question. And that's fair enough. You want to know what your independent that you would vote for is going to do. I've always said that I'm happy to sit down at the table and negotiate with anybody. And when I say anybody, either party or any of the parties that are in government. But right now, we don't even know who the ALP candidate is. There's no Greens candidate. I mean, at this point in time, we don't really know the state of play. In fact, the election hasn't even been called. So none of us can officially really nominate. But the fact that we're not in an actual party where we have to toe a party line, that's actually a cause for celebration. That is something to be, that is our power. I mean, on the crossbenches, we can sit down and sit at the table and negotiate what it is that you, the community, because again, I don't have any vested interests or any backing from, big regional irrigated groups, whatever. It's me. I back me based on the knowledge of my communities, my lived experience, and what it is you tell me that you want. So this is our negotiation power. Now, if you have the same, you're probably going to get the same. So at this point in time, all I can say is we don't know the state of play yet. Certainly, I don't know whether, independents back Greens and the Labors. I mean, I don't know what the facts are there. But all I can tell you is that I'm listening to my communities around the electorate, and that is what is important, and that will be what I'll be discussing to any particular party that's in power. And that is our power as an independent on the crossbench. Hope that answers your question, Malcolm.
I just chose to stand as an independent because I don't feel like I fit in any of the parties. And I think if you really want to progress the country, you need to be open to work with either side. And really, it's all about the policy. So for me, that's why I chose to stand as an independent.
Chris. If we could limit the questions to people with the microphones, then this night will move.
I wouldn't put any in.
much
That's
smoother.
why I was an independent.
So Malcolm, I am not an independent. We are an independent political party. We are not affiliated or give any of our political clout to any particular party. Just so you know that we actually have had senators in Parliament in the past, and we continue to work with senators in the Parliament right now. And as a matter of fact, a lot of the work that's being done on some of our bills that are in before the Senate Estimates Committee, I think one of our bills has been in before. We were working with a number of senators from various parties. Fair to say they weren't from the Conservatives or Labor. They don't want to see us in there because we've got policies that would change the landscape of Australian politics for the better. The major parties don't want that. They want this oligarchical control, and that's what's happening. So, to answer your question, no, I certainly wouldn't be wanting to side with one of the two majors, but I would certainly be seeking support if one of our points was to get up and they were interested. You pick anyone who's going to take your legislation on board or your policies on board.
Stuart?
I'm not an independent. I'm not standing as an independent. So I don't think the question's relevant to me.
Okay. I will open.
You want me to answer it?
Just for
Oh,
context, Stuart,
I'm
what I might do is open it up to yourself.
I'm happy to answer it. I'm happy to answer it for Alan. That's fine. Because at this point in time, we're a minor party. Obviously, our preferred option is that everybody realises the importance of their vote this election and gives us their number one, and then we don't have to worry about who we're supporting and stuff like that. That's our preferred option, is that we will form government. Second option, that we win enough seats that somebody wants to come alongside us to help us form government. Third option, we sit on the crossbench. Simple as that.
Yep. Dr. Webster, as a member of a major party, question is possibly not worded correctly for you, but it would be of our interest to find out why you are a member of the Nationals per se.
I think that politics should be about outcomes and politics should be about strength, and it also should be using democratic processes. I sit in the Nationals party room. At this moment, there are 21 of us, and we battle out the issues in the party room. And we don't always agree. That won't shock you, but we don't always agree. And I am known, bad or good, to be a little bit ferocious in the party room about the issues that matter to Mallee. I'm not a candidate or an MP for Queensland. So I'm not so fussed about Queensland. I'm very fussed about Mallee. And so there are disagreements that occur in the party room, and it is a matter of doing all those political things that you need to do, which is ensuring that you've got the numbers to be pushing a particular issue forward. That is the nature of politics. And then the Nationals Party goes to the Liberal Party, i.e. the leaders do, and they fight for the issues that we have raised in the party room. There is actually strength in party. It is not all bad. Sure, I don't get everything I want. First to admit that. I don't get everything I want, but I'll have a darn good crack. And if I've got 21 others and ultimately the rest of the Liberals to come alongside, then that's a huge win for us, because we actually can make decisions. We can change policy. We can make sure that more funding, for example, comes to regional centres as opposed to in urban infrastructure. So for me, parties are a strength. I don't think they're a strength when everyone is shushed up and you can't say what you want to say. But you've also got to have wisdom about what you're going to gain for your electorate. If you're going to blow everybody up and not be in government, but be on the other side, that's not a win for anyone. So it is a matter of, this is why they call it politics. I hate to tell you, but that's why they call it politics. And yeah, you just got to work really hard.
Thank you. Greg, do you have
Yeah, we might do another one online just to mix it up a bit.
Fantastic.
This one's from Pauline McCracken, who's a local. Where do candidates stand on environmental issues, and three things in particular: climate change, national park preservation and the barrier reef?
That's me again.
I might go right to left this time.
I went right to left the last
Yeah, no,
election.
that's cool. That's all good. So climate change is a complex issue, especially in regional Australia. Our economies are closely linked to the land, and I think Mallee is a there's lots of opportunities for Mallee with renewables. Obviously, we need to have infrastructure that we can actually put the electricity into that's generated from those. I think there's real opportunity through agriculture to pursue environmental outcomes. I think there's a real opportunity around technologies that are coming. There's carbon sequestration, green hydrogen. So there are opportunities that agriculture can help with environmental concerns. Also, I think particularly with agriculture, we also need to invest in efficient supply chains. And if we have efficient supply chains, well then obviously, which includes rail, investment in rail, you know, we'll reduce our emissions and take some trucks off the road. So as far as that goes, I'll admit I don't know too much about the Barrier Reef. Obviously, I've been there a couple of times. I know that it is in trouble, but I also know there's been some areas where there's been some good regeneration work as well. So I can't really comment on the Barrier Reef. And what was the other one?
National parks.
Oh, national parks. National parks, I think, could benefit from a different funding model. And I think national parks should be accessible to people for some activities. And but I also believe that you have to respect our Indigenous heritage within those as well. So I do think that national parks need a perhaps more of a collaborative approach moving forward.
I'll go from bottom to top to answer those questions. I'm not over the issues on the Barrier Reef well enough to pass comment on that. The same with national parks, not over those issues enough to pass comment on that. When it comes to climate change, I'm assuming Pauline, I think it was, who asked the question, if she's referring to carbon emissions. What I will say is that as a party, we're committed to investigating nuclear as an energy source. Nuclear has no carbon emissions. And like I said earlier in my presentation, we'll balance between coal, nuclear and renewables. When we talk about, if we're relating carbon emissions to climate change, I think it's important to note that Australia accounts for about 1% of the world's carbon emissions. I think we've got 6 remaining coal-fired power stations in Australia. China and India together have over 1,200. Another interesting statistic from a mate of mine who works in the energy industry is that in China alone, they build the equivalent of Australia's energy industry every single year. They add to it. And the majority of that is coal-fired. You want to talk about renewables? Let's talk about lithium. So to produce enough lithium for a car battery, you need to mine 250 tonnes of ore. So if you think of the MCG, you need to dig a hole as big as the MCG to get enough lithium for 2,500 cars. That's some pretty bloody big holes that are going to be around the world. The other important component of lithium is cobalt. The majority of the world's cobalt comes from the Congo, deep in Africa, where children as young as 8 mine cobalt with no protective equipment with their hands. So if that's the sort of future that you want, if you care about the environment, then we need to look at other options in terms of carbon emissions. But there's some hard, stark facts that you need to consider before we go on a headlong path to net zero 2050. Thanks.
Okay, so I'd like to speak into this with a few points that Stuart has also mentioned, and Sophie as well. But one of the things that we can do immediately here in Mallee, in terms of, I know that Paul answered about carbon emissions. Firstly, we can, and I have been talking to, and by the way, one of my children who has graduated from Deakin with a Bachelor of Marine Science. We have a very robust discussion about the Great Barrier Reef in our house. So I think I understand what is going on, and for me to sit here and think I can solve it would be just misleading you. But fair to say, I do understand. But carbon emissions, getting to that. Here in the Mallee, we can adopt sustainable farming practices for farmers across the Mallee, from broadacre through to irrigated agriculture and horticulture. The use of, to help reduce the use of chemically produced fertilisers, petrochemicals, etc. Trying to increase carbon content in our soils. And these practices would be in line with regenerative farming. I don't know if any farmers out there at the moment who understand that. I do. I was a dairy farmer in the Riverina, and this is what we did on our farm 20 years ago. And we found it was very, very successful in terms of changing the biosphere and making things work differently and better by not using chemicals and not using fertilizers as we do, Haenel's fertilizers. So that'd be one thing that needs to be looked at. Secondly, I heard it mentioned about the trucks on the roads. Well, and I'm just making going to Malcolm's point. He brought up that an issue that's a state issue, and you are quite right, is a state issue. That's the Murray Basin Rail project, but it is funded federally as well. And it was an agreement between the Victoria and the federal government, and also some private companies as well. And what that was designed to do was, one, take all the freight, which is, now I'm not going to quote the figures, but it is phenomenal, the amount of product, be it grain, mineral sands, containerized goods. I think I think I was just having a chat to someone the other day about that. We're looking at what, 4 million tonnes of grain, 3 million tonnes of mineral sands, and some 30 to 40,000 containers going out of this region from Mildura around this region to the ports. So the failure of the completion or this project to even get halfway done has meant that this project is, and this region, the Mallee, is in a worse off condition or position than it was before the project was even started. So what that means is we are going to see, with the onset of a great harvest, we are going to see thousands and thousands of B doubles on our roads, on our B and C class roads. And that's why our roads are falling to pieces. We are going to have trucks all over us because this project has failed in its delivery because it has run out of money. So that's just two of the points that I would like to bring up. In terms of energy and carbon emissions, we have no choice at this point in time. We have to go nuclear. We have to consider it. And one of our policies is to repeal first the insanity of the Australian government to have a prohibition on nuclear power. Even if tomorrow we said yes, we can't, because it's been enshrined in law that we can't. So we have thorium on our beaches to produce nuclear power, and we can't. We have uranium in our mines, and we can't even use it ourselves. So we need to start doing that sort of thing. And just a fun fact about renewable energy: the amount of carbon emissions that go into producing wind turbines, solar panels, lithium batteries. If you knew the truth, you would be disgusted. We are told a lie. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you. So many points. Great Barrier Reef, the federal government has invested hundreds of millions of dollars into the Great Barrier Reef, and yes, there is a huge improvement in it. The current situation needs to be reviewed, but I'll leave that to the research scientists. In terms of the renewables in Mallee, I'm extremely proud of the investment of renewables in Mallee. What has been missing, as has already been alluded to, is the ability to store when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing. And one of the investments has been the solar hydro piece in Carwarp up in the north. There need to be many, many more investments to make that viable. I absolutely take your point about subsidies as well. It's not just the fact that solar and wind is made out of products that aren't any good when you want to get rid of them. But it's also about the subsidies and the subsidisation of renewables. I think it needs a serious look into going forward. Australia, we are the highest solar rooftop nation in the world in the number of homes that have solar. And, you know, I mean, that does make a huge difference. We can't upload our power at this point in time. There is a lot of work going on in the interconnectors that are happening in Victoria, the Kerrang link, the interconnector, the West, I haven't got that name right, but anyway, that one that's down south. And, you know, we don't have enough gas in Victoria. Up in our way, there is no gas being mined here. There's no coal being mined here. So renewables is what we can produce. I have been a member of the Parliamentary Friends of Nuclear Energy from the day I stepped into Parliament, and I'm very proud of that. And we have to have a bipartisan approach. Without a bipartisan approach, we go nowhere with nuclear. So that is a work to look into moving forward. Australia, we have to take Australia with us. We can't beat people over the head to say we're going to go nuclear. We need Australia to come with us. We need Labor to do that as well. So that is, I can't tell you how many scientists I've heard presenting nuclear energy and the safe options of small modular reactors all around the world, including Rolls-Royce, who make them, and where they are providing the cleanest energy available. So that's a piece of work going forward. What was the other one? Did I do them all? Oh, national parks. Look, national parks are fundamentally Victorian state, so I'm not going to go there.
Oh, so much to unpack there. Thanks for the question, Pauline McCracken. Well, I just found, okay. So first of all, when it comes to the impacts on our environment, climate change, action on climate change, the science is out there. I mean, I'm not the scientist, same as we're not the doctors when it comes to, you know, a pandemic. But the science is out there, and that's what we follow, the same as we would follow the medical advice when there's a pandemic. And the science clearly says that, you know, we need to, as a community, address climate change. Now, there are benefits to that, from homes to farms to businesses. I mean, we have, and Mallee is really well placed for renewables. In fact, that's where part of our economic recovery lies. For instance, there's Orange in New South Wales. They have just finished trials and a test where the whole town was, sorry?
That's sorry.
The whole town was energised by renewables. In fact, they were able to they produced that much that they were then able to on-sell it and make profit from that. So, you know, there's so much out there as far as science goes, but essentially the government, the federal government, needs to have the funding to invest in these new ways and for us to go forward, to be able to transfer that energy that we are well placed to create in Mallee and bring that back across the electorate. So as far as action on climate change goes, it's really, the science is out there, and that's what we need to look at. And I know Dr. Ann said that politics, you know, is about outcomes. Well, not really. Well, yes and no, but more importantly, politics is about people. And, you know, we've got a couple of three generations of people in our audience tonight. So what is our planet going to look like if we're not listening to the science for the people of the next generation? You know, and again, that's what you want as a community. If I was elected to Canberra as an independent and I was able to negotiate for you, it would be what you would want as a community. As for nuclear, I mean, you know, we were up in arms about children working on for the lithium and what do we do with the batteries and all this sort of thing. The elephant in the room on nuclear is, what do we do with the nuclear waste? I mean, you know, this is a massive problem. Do we just dig a hole and bury it and forget about it, or pop it in the bottom of the ocean and forget about it? I mean, there's so much to work through on that, but it needs everything on climate change needs investment from government, research and development to get the right things for us going forward. Now, okay, and just on the transport option, we talked about trucks and rail. We have B-triples going through our towns right now, okay? The roads are impacted. We talk about, yep, let's do rail and let's get everything on rail. That's awesome and that's great and let's do that. But the fact is, and again, this is from my experience in local government, the fact is that it is simply not viable compared to the cost of transporting something on our roads. So, you know, these are all things that we have to look at. But anyway, thanks for the question. As for parks, correct, it is a state issue and the barrier reef is important. Thanks.
Thank you. It turns out one topic more nuclear than COVID turns out the environment. So thank you very much, Pauline. I think we have two more questions. We will slightly go over time. Hopefully no one wants to watch the finale of Maths, but
You can watch it on 9 now.
oh, there we go.
Can't hear it. Ben, we can't hear it.
Sorry, we just can't hear you because the microphone has ceased working. Is it off? There we go.
Do I repeat? Pam Kappa, Dimboola. There's a large number of independents probably going to be standing in the coming election, and I suspect it is because people feel that we don't have decent leaders in our main parties, political parties. That's certainly my concern, that we do not have leaders and politicians who are honest and genuine about their support for Australia and so on. So could I ask each of you, please, to make a very brief comment about how do we get decent leaders in our political system?
If we could limit this to 1 minute, Dr. Webster, is that okay?
Thanks for the question, Pam. Leadership is only possible if people follow. And in a party, you are selected to be a leader because of your track record, because you deliver for your people. And that doesn't mean you can necessarily trust everybody who's a leader, obviously, but generally it's a democratic process within the party. In some parties, there are factions and there are all kinds of other things at play. We understand that. But I think the first step is electing people who are honest, who at least attempt to be honest, and who do what they say. And if you elect those people, then they eventually build the party platform and hopefully make it into leadership. Yeah, look, I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Chris.
Thanks for your question. It's a pretty deep question, and you are quite right. If you look over the history of Australian politics, we have lost the statesmanship of our politicians. We've had some wonderful and amazing politicians over the history of Australian politics, and that needs to return. And just highlighting what Dr. Webster's just said, that we need to focus on strength of character in our organisations. And I know in our organisation, we all have a very similar philosophy that we focus on the common good, what is good for our communities, their communities' welfare and well-being. And I believe those sorts of traits, if they are in your organisation, will overflow into the leadership of those who represent you if elected. And I know that's one thing that I do. I strongly focus on people and focus on what people really want, not what they want a politician to do, but what they really want in their lives. And a lot of that stuff, it takes a little bit of chipping away. And that's where that one-on-one thing with people in the community brings you to a point where you understand, and that, I guess, empowers you to then be a representative, I guess, and a shining star for all those people you speak to.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I think you elect people who have real life experience and who have runs on the board in terms of leadership, whether that's at community level, whether that's at a lower level of government, and people who have a reputation in the community for high moral integrity, moral standing, and great character. And then you will get, if you had 151 of them in Parliament House, then you might actually get one decent one out of the whole lot of them. Thanks.
Yep, I pretty much agree with Stuart as well, but I'd also like to add that I think empathy is an important characteristic of a leader. I think strength is obviously valid as well, but you've got to have empathy to listen to people so that you can actually work out what the problem is and help to move it forward.
True. Sorry, Claudia, the question was, why do we not have good leadership?
Why do we not?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks for the question. Yes, good leadership. Well, I would just, back what the rest of the candidates said, but good leadership essentially for me, this is my personal mission and point of view on it. In politics, I'm not a career politician. I've just sort of landed into politics because of an interest through how it affects community. But it's true, we want to see more, not career politicians, but real life people who've had real lived experience. I think as community, we want to see people that look like us, that reflect us and, able to stand up for us and represent us in Canberra. But also and emotional intelligence is definitely part of it. You need to be able to care, listen to people. And also, I think a major part of this is actually vision. We can't step into representing you as a community without vision. So, you really need to find out what the vision is for us as leaders. And as I said, I've got a 12-point plan that I'm happy to chat to anyone about that. But need vision, emotional intelligence, be able to listen and, to have real lived experience and a good moral compass. That's about it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia.
Thank you. We might have to wrap it up there. I know there's a couple more questions, but the candidates will stay around afterwards. I'm going to hand over to the Mayor in a moment, but there's a range of questions and comments being made online. I'd just like to indicate to the candidates, if you want to go in there and respond to some of those, we obviously haven't got time to go through them all. That chat will remain open, and if you want to personally respond to them, you can. I'd just like to hand over to the Mayor. Thank you.
I'd just like to thank everyone that came tonight and everyone that's watched along. We've had a really good range of questions and it's covered a lot of topics. Thank you so much to the candidates for your time coming this evening and for your informative answers. Thank you, Ben, for facilitating the forum. And as Greg said, there's some light refreshments. If those would like to stay around and chat with the candidates, you're more than welcome. But thank you for coming.